And next up is Mr. Jud Valeski, Chief Technology Officer at Techstars. You've heard the name a few times today, and I probably guess that you will hear it a bit more throughout the course of this event. Mr. Valeski co-founded GNIP, which is a company specializing in the utilization of social data from things like Facebook and the hashtag. And Twitter acquired GNIP in 2014, but instead of diving headfirst into a career of photography, he, for example, is here today discussing data and technology. Welcome.
I'm going to take Scott's lead and use a handheld mic here. Hi there, I'm Jud Valeski. I'm CTO of Techstars, headquartered in Boulder, Colorado. That's where I live. It's where I've grown up. I'm actually not going to talk a lot about Techstars. I've only been in the role for about 3 months. I'm going to eventually get to some discussion around scale at GNIP, where I spent a good 6 years of my career a couple of years ago. I think there's some good scale lessons in there that I want to get out and share. A little bit about my background first. I graduated from the University of Colorado in Boulder with a computer science degree. And so I'm a software engineer by trade. Been writing software my whole life. Started my career in California at Netscape Communications on the browser team, working on networking infrastructure and protocols, and actually in the cookie implementation, which has always been near and dear to my heart. And every time I get in front of an audience, I ask the following question. It's curious to see how it's evolved over time. So think about your browsing behavior, browsers you use, and then the question is, how many of you clear your cookies ever? Please raise your hand if you clear your cookies. I'd say that's 15-ish% of the audience. And then how many of you clear once a week? Once a day? Okay, fading off there. But anyway, say 15-20% of you, just for your own edification, are clearing cookies. That's my own selfish survey there. Take that with me as I go. How often should you be, was the question. It depends on who you ask. If you ask an ad tech guy, never. It's deeply woven in, obviously. It goes beyond ad tracking, and a lot of functionalities wrapped up in cookies. So I never do, personally. Too valuable. Let's see. So yeah, started my career software Netscape, and then stayed with Netscape a long time as it scaled. AOL, America Online eventually bought Netscape, and I stayed on through that acquisition. Moved back to Boulder, Colorado, which for those of you who don't know is a small community. It's about 100,000 people. And when I moved back to Colorado, I was in software, obviously, and Boulder had not established much of a software ecosystem yet. So I telecommuted for many years. And then in mid-2000s, a few things happened to the entrepreneurial startup ecosystem that I think Iceland is in the midst of. The talent pool had established itself in terms of software. Venture capital, the appropriate venture capitalists had moved in, and those were folks who had experience investing in software startups, particularly in the Bay Area, and then they had migrated to Colorado. Capital that understands investing in startups is very important. It's very different from any other kind of investing, and in particular tech startups. So around then we had some solid venture capitalists move into the ecosystem, and that helped. And then of course, great ideas. Innovative uses of software, innovative uses of hardware, creation around hardware, and so on. Around that time, a venture capitalist, Brad Feld, introduced myself to my co-founder of GNIP, a guy named Eric Marcoulier. And we had this idea around aggregating and pulling together social data. And if you think back mid-2000s, Social data then is not what it is today. We all use Facebook and Twitter and Flickr and Instagram and so on prolifically today. That was not the case a long time ago. The thought we had was that, of course, social communication, social software was going to explode in terms of use, as it has. But again, back then, not so obvious. Out of that explosion, we believed there was going to be a lot of commercial demand for the public side of that data. All of the tweets that move through the system every day, all the pictures that are posted and comments on videos and such have a lot of commercial value, as it turns out. And we wanted to build a company that sat in the middle of all of that social activity, pulled it together, and then distributed it back out in a consistent, reliable manner. And we built a business to do just that. We integrated with lots of different social providers, dozens of different social providers, from Twitter to Facebook and Flickr and YouTube and so on, and distributed that data. Before I get into the scale components that I want to touch on at GNIP, I want to describe the model a little bit in a little more detail, just so you understand what we were up against. So we had multiple players in the system. There were the publishers, as we called them, and these were the social networks themselves that established consumer relationships with everyone in this room. And then we had commercial entities that were interested in consuming this data. And a gentleman talking earlier, his platform, the data market analytics platform, undoubtedly is consuming social data, and quite possibly a GNIP customer at some point, as an example customer. And so we had publishers and then commercial consumers, and then GNIP would sit in the middle and shuttle data back and forth between the two. We started in early 2008, and as had been mentioned, we had sold the company in early 2014 to one of our partners, Twitter. And this gets to one of the scale topics I wanted to touch on, and that was the scaling of this partnership, this relationship between us, a small startup, and an important partner. Oh, and yeah, by the way, I don't have slides for this. This is slide free. There's no technical glitch here. So at the beginning, the genesis of the company obviously was based on social data, and our relationships with these publishers, these social data providers, were of obvious importance. So early on, we of course reached out to all what we considered significant social providers, and spent as much time as we could with them illustrating this commercial marketplace for their data. And as partnerships go, lots of fits and starts in that dynamic, of course. Lots of trying to explain to the partner what the marketplace could be, illustrating to them the value in the system. And then over the course of about a year or so, Twitter had made their fire hose available to a variety of different companies. And as they were trying to understand, and as they were trying to scale, they were trying to understand what their commercial data product was going to look like. We consistently made ourselves available and present in their world and in their ecosystem. Again, illustrating to them this thing that was relatively foreign, which was a commercial ecosystem for the data. They were very versed in the consumer side of things. And so we established a regular drumbeat trying to tell the story. And over time, they realized there was money to be made there. However, they did not believe it was with us. They instead turned to larger corporations, Google and Microsoft, and Facebook specifically, not Facebook there, Google and Microsoft. And we're selling the fire hose to them at $1 million per month for multi-year agreement for those deals, which essentially had kicked us out of the space and the partnership arrangement with them. And that lasted for a couple of years, but we stayed at it and continued to build our own business, our own set of customers to illustrate that there's general value in our product in the social data ecosystem. And did precisely that. We, over the first year and a half or so, we were trying to establish the product underpinnings, and really did not generate much, if any, revenue. But after about a year and a half, things started to click, and we started to build an actual customer base, and continued to illustrate that to all of our partners, Twitter in particular. And over the years, they were able to see the growth of this overall marketplace. It was not just Google, it was not just Microsoft, and we were trying to illustrate to them that the what felt like a lot of money to them at the time, $1 million per month for each of those agreements, was actually going to be relatively small to the overall marketplace, and continued to grow customer base and so on. And as Twitter was itself scaling, they were experimenting with these commercial deals. At the time, their CEO, Dick Costello, had his own scaling moment, which was the company was diffuse and considering too many different vectors in terms of what they wanted to do with the business. So one day he told everyone at Twitter, we are about consumers. We're about customer-facing product. We're not about commercial business. We're not about B2B. If you're working on anything but consumer-facing product, stop. And so the small group inside Twitter that was running those commercial agreements quite literally ceased and had to move on to more consumer-facing product. And because of all the energy we had put in over time, establishing and maintaining relationships, they came to us and took a deeper look at the commercial side of everything that we had been scaling and building, and realized that we had done precisely what we said we were going to do, which was build a broader ecosystem. This was not just about two large companies. This was about hundreds of companies consuming social data. And so in that moment of their scale, they signed a partnership agreement with us to allow GNIP to be the social data provider for Twitter. And obviously that led to another significant scaling moment for GNIP. And the lesson I had learned there was the amount of time and energy that goes into a partnership is not just a small burst. This is something that takes many months, many years to actually come to fruition, if it's going to come to fruition at all. And when often we can wind up in these dynamics where there's short bursts of energy to try to establish something discrete that you're actually after. Just a couple minutes left here. I want to bring up something on the scale front around roles and responsibility and scale that while we were road tripping around Iceland the other day came up in the car in conversation. And it's really about leadership and hiring the right people at the right time. We often wind up in this headspace where there's one person that can do everything, whether it's in sales or whether it's the CEO of the company or it's a particular software developer. But one thing I came to learn at my time at GNIP, where I started as CTO, I wound up in the CEO role, and then I wound up back in the CTO position, was this arc is really about getting the right person in the right role at the right time. And there, in my experience, there's rarely one of those that spans across the entire arc of a company. So as you're building what you're building, I would urge you to consider that as you're scaling. Be open to other folks coming into the system, other people coming into the system at different times, depending on where you are, to ensure the overall success of the company, rather than you holding on to your ego and believing that you're necessarily the one to take it from the start all the way to the finish. I could not have done what I did at GNIP, and I don't think we would have had the success we had ultimately at GNIP if we had not taken these moments to develop and bring in different talent at different times throughout the company's arc. So hopefully a couple of tidbits in there that are useful on the scale front. Thanks for all your time.